Approximately halfway through the novel Little Dorrit, the setting of the action moves to Switzerland. There, a party of travelers are climbing the historic Great St. Bernard Pass in order to take refuge for the night at the convent of the Great St. Bernard Hospice. Throughout its history, the hospice has gained a worldwide reputation for its employment of St. Bernard dogs in rescue efforts. As darkness falls over the mountains, the arrival at the monastery is recounted in a manner that is reminiscent of Dickens's dramatic style and the dismal mood. A grisly description of a morgue for the frozen dead is then provided as the live travelers congregate nearby for warmth and shelter. The location of the mortuary is just a stone's throw away. It is important to quote the paragraph in its entirety. There, too, quietly gathering in a grating house half a dozen paces away, with the same cloud enfolding them and the same snowflakes falling in upon them, were the dead travelers discovered atop the mountain. This was all taking place while all of this mayhem and commotion was going on among the live travelers. The woman, who had been frightened by a storm many winters ago, was still standing in the corner with her child at her breast. The man, who had frozen with his arm raised to his mouth in terror or hunger, was still pressing it with his parched lips after years and years of waiting. Unbelievably, a terrible business organization has come together. An incredible foresight on the part of that mother to have predicted. Surrounded by so many and such companions upon whom I have never looked, and upon whom I will never look any longer, I and my child will dwell together inseparable on the great St. Bernard, outlasting generations who will come to see us, and they will never know our name, or one word of our story other than the end. There is a sense of profound melancholy and a hushed fear in this scenario. I was intrigued by the brief description of, so I did some more research on it, and discovered that Dickens had discovered the mortuary when he was traveling in Switzerland in the year 1846. Switzerland was a location that Dickens loved and had visited on several occasions during his life. One of the most intriguing pieces of background information on the scenario in Little Dorrit is found in a letter that he sent to his friend and biographer, John Forster. It looked as if Dickens was both enthralled and scared by the environment, and he described the desolation of the area with a certain relish. I pray to God that you are able to visit that location. There was a large depression on the peak of a range of terrible mountains, which was surrounded by riven rocks of every form and color. In the middle of the hollow was a dark lake, and phantom clouds were constantly hovering over it. There are peaks, points, and plains of endless ice and snow that enclose the vista and block off the world on every side. The lake does not reflect anything, and there is not a single human being in the picture. The walls of the monastery are desolate and gray, and there is no sign of any living things or live interest in the image. No vegetation of any type or kind was present. There was no growth, and there was no movement. Every single item that was frozen and iron-bound. The outhouse that served as the morgue was located next to the convent, and it was crowded with people who had traversed the pass. The bodies that had not been claimed were displayed in the snow. They were not laid down or stretched out, but standing up, in corners and against walls. Some erect and horribly human, with distinct expressions on the faces. Some sunk down on their knees, some dropping over on one side, some tumbled down altogether and presenting a heap of skulls and fibrous dust. There is no other deterioration in that climate, and there they stay throughout the short days and the long nights, the sole human company out of doors, withering away by grains and retaining terrible possession of the mountain where they died. On a voyage that was fraught with peril from the elements and brigands, the Great St. Bernard Hospice was established in 1049 with the purpose of providing protection and refuge to travelers. Despite the fact that it continues to serve as a hospice for travelers and serves as a monastery, the mortuary looks to be sealed, which suggests that its previous residents have long since left. The fact that this was not some remote atrocity on alien lands that insulted the civilized sensibilities of a traveling British gentleman is a key point to keep in mind. It was not lost on Dickens that the burial grounds, hospitals, and churchyards of London contained many more horrifying things than he had suspected. The neighborhood of Oberhofen, which is located in the canton of Bern in Switzerland, is home to the castle known as Oberhofen Castle. It has a place of national importance and is a Swiss heritage site. Balm Castle was constructed by Freiherr von Oberhofen on a hilltop above the hamlet during the High Middle Ages. Through her marriage to a member of the von Eschenbach family in the year 1200, Ita, a daughter of the family, bestowed to this family both the castle and the settlement. The construction of a new moated fortress on the banks of Lake Thun might be traced back to the 13th century. John, the nephew of King Albert I, was responsible for the murder of Walter IV von Eschenbach, who was one of the final proprietors of the castle. The murder took place in the year 1308. The von Eschenbach family was compelled to surrender Oberhofen and the castle to the Habsburgs in the year 1306. Vassals were selected by the Habsburgs to rule the region on their behalf. The Kyburgs, who also held Thun Castle, were particularly prominent among these vassals. As a result of the loss of the Kyburg in the Burgdorfer Krieg in 1383 to 1384, and the ultimate defeat of the Habsburgs at the Battle of Sempach in 1386, Bern started expanding into the Austrian holdings in the Bernese Oberland. In the year 1386, they took control of Oberhofen, and in the year 1397, they were eventually able to acquire or take all of the property and privileges from every feudal landlord. Ludwig von Seftigen, a resident of Bern, was the buyer of the castle and Oberhofen Herrschaft the next year after they conducted the transaction. A number of Bernese aristocratic families were responsible for the ownership of the town, castle, and Herrschaft during the course of the subsequent centuries. Bern was able to purchase the castle and the grounds in Oberhofen when the male line of the von Erlach family in Oberhofen passed away in the year 1652. In addition to establishing the bailiwick of Oberhofen, they also transformed Oberhofen Castle into the administrative hub for the bailiwick. As a result of the French invasion that took place in 1798, Oberhofen am Thunersee was included into the canton of Oberland of the Austrian Republic. Immediately upon the dissolution of the Republic and the Act of Mediation of 1803, it became a part of the newly established Thun district. After 1803, the castle was moved into private ownership, and throughout the subsequent years, it was owned by a number of different people. From 1849 to 1852, the Portal family undertook renovations and expansions to the castle, resulting in its current look. William Maule Measy, an American, formed the Oberhofen Castle Foundation in 1940 with the purpose of conducting administration and maintenance of the castle. The Historical Museum of Bern decided to include it into their collection in 1952, and 2 years later, they created a section of the museum inside the castle. Chillon, also known as Chateau de Chillon, is a beautiful fort defended by Lake Geneva and a moat between a tiny island and the mainland. It sits on Lake Geneva near Chateau, Switzerland, and was first referenced between 1160 and 1005 AD. The date of its construction is unknown, but its location has always been vital for commanding the route to the St. Bernard Pass. The Romans must have valued this location since their tiles and money were discovered there, and a Roman tower was built on the rock in the 9th century. Thomas I of Savoy wanted the castle reinforced and adorned in 1224 to make it his principal home. A tiny settlement sprung established under castle protection. Charles III of Savoy demolished this to build castle cannon firing lanes. However, Thomas established Villeneuve on the lakeshore, little over a mile distant, which became affluent due to its location on the major road to Rome. This road was so popular with Christian pilgrims that a hospice in Villeneuve provided 600 plums of food daily. Pierre, Thomas's son, taxed the town's commerce and erected the castle walls to empower him to rule Vaud. The castle and its residents prospered, but in the 14th century, the protracted wars between England and France destroyed pilgrims' paths, reducing Chillon's prominence. After the local kings left, chatelains, men from important families in the region, controlled it and utilized it as a jail. In a unique dungeon, captives were regularly hanged from a big black wood beam that spanned the stone room. As the Black Death spread in 1342, some Christians accused Chablis Jews of polluting water sources and creating the disease. This preposterous allegation got these unfortunates imprisoned and sent to Chillon to face the Count of Savoy. He ordered their subterranean imprisonment and torture. Local Christians who were acquainted with Jews were regarded similarly. The 1382 Chillon tragedy was one of the worst. Sir Raoul de Montagnard, the castle's terrible dictator known as the Breaker, wanted to marry Erdelinde, his first cousin's lovely daughter. However, she loved Mainfroy de Luceus, a young man whose father was Sir Raoul's worst adversary. Erdelinde and Mainfroy secretly married and had a child to avoid his fury. After Erdelinde's father died, Sir Raoul forced her into Chillon and had a priest marry them in the castle chapel. Since the priest had secretly married Erdelinde, he refused to conduct the ceremony when he met her. Erdelinde had her kid brought to the altar to show Sir Raoul that this marriage was impossible. In a rage, the master of Chillon grabbed the kid and threw it out the chapel window into the lake below. Erdelinde instantly jumped after it, drowning mother and child. The grieving real husband of Erdelinde, Mainfroy de Luceus, challenged Sir Raoul to a fight in which he died from serious wounds. 27 witches were killed at Chillon between June 9 and September 26, 1613. François de Bonnavar was Chillon's most renowned prisoner. A well-educated, rich young man, he sympathized with Genevins who revolted against Charles III of Savoy in the early 16th century. His arrest and imprisonment at Chillon Castle. As a political prisoner, he was decently treated until 1532, when the Duke of Savoy visited the castle and ordered him to be imprisoned underground. After 4 years, his buddies liberated him. In 1816, Lord Byron visited the cell and saw the lonely prisoner's footmarks on one of 7 stone pillars, where he was chained for extended hours. Bonnavard's captivity inspired Byron's renowned poem, The Prisoner of Chillon. The poem, however not historically accurate, conveyed the prisoner's thoughts and became one of Byron's most famous. Today, Chillon is well maintained. A wooden bridge replaces a drawbridge across a lake-filled moat. 2 rows of apertures and 3 semicircular towers adorn the outside wall. The castle's famed oubliettes were in the middle tower. Unwary tourists may stumble into these oubliettes and disappear. One was a pitch-black shaft with stairs, or so it appeared. The victim stepped into space and hurtled down a 90-foot chute to die in moat water after the second step. Bonnavard's dungeon was near the execution chamber. Here are the 7 pillars, and this legendary freedom fighter was shackled to the 5th. When Byron visited the gloomy jail of his idol, he carved his name a few pillars away.
The fact that it was too complex for humans to construct, the actual devil himself was the one who constructed the ancient bridge. It was agreed upon by the devil that he would construct the bridge in return for the soul of the first creature to attempt to cross it. On the other hand, he was deceived by a shrewd elderly lady who tossed food over the bridge. Her dog chased after the bread, and as a result, he became the first being to cross the new bridge. On their way to Isbiti Sinfin, the monks of Strata, Florida, most likely built the bridge in the 12th century. This belief is supported by the fact that the bridge was created. The construction of the second bridge began in 1753, while the construction of the top bridge did not begin until 1901. The breathtaking waterfalls that can be seen on the River Mainach, sometimes known as the Monks River, are located on a tributary of the Rheidol River. During its relatively short trip of 39 kilometers, 24 miles to the sea in Aberystwyth, the Rheidol itself is an extremely steep river with a drop of around 550 meters, 1880 feet. Over the course of thousands and maybe millions of years, the topography of the river systems in Highland Ceredigion and the stunning waterfalls are a monument to the complicated process of erosion that was caused by ice and water. Located around 12 miles inland from Aberystwyth, Hafod Ustrid, which is now just referred to as Hafod, may be found between Devil's Bridge and Pontrygros. In its heyday, Hafod was a spectacular masterpiece that was created in the 18th century by the owner of the estate, Thomas Jonas, 1748-1816. Jonas constructed a splendid new country home in this distant spot and planned out its woodland gardens in the style of a picturesque environment. Among the features were a number of different circuit walks, as well as a series of different vistas and landscapes. Although it is unfortunate that only the stables of the Hafod house structures are still standing, some of them have been assessed and repaired, and they are considered to be among the most beautiful and picturesque settings in Europe. Hafod Church, which is located on the border of the estate, is an elegant and calm structure. During your visit, you will have the opportunity to learn about the sculptures and stained glass that Thomas Johnnies had erected, but which were sadly destroyed by fire. The arch, which was built as a memorial to King George III, is one of the constructions that Thomas Johnnies built in order to improve the views from his estate. During their travels across Wales in the 18th century, the nobles quickly made Hafod a vital stop on their itinerary. The region was portrayed by the author George Borrow in his book Wild Wales, which has never been out of print since it was first published in 1854 all the way up to the present day. In the past, Devil's Bridge has been a popular tourist site, and the well-known waterfalls and bridges continue to captivate travelers even in the present day.